U.S. government strategic Bitcoin reserve. Now, this was announced by David Sachs, and the Bitcoin market immediately tanked as he announced it. But I'm gonna maybe make the argument that the reaction was kind of uncalled for, and actually think that this announcement was pretty great. But we'll have a debate and talk about why the market dumped, and why like this was underwhelming for a lot of people, and why I think that people are not reading between the lines enough, and this is actually really bullish. But let me first read the exact post by David Sachs. So he says, just a few minutes ago, President Trump signed an executive order to establish a strategic Bitcoin reserve. The reserve will be capitalized with Bitcoin owned by the federal government that was forfeited as part of criminal or civil asset forfeiture proceedings. This means that it will not cost taxpayers a dime. It is estimated that the U.S. government owns about 200,000 Bitcoin. However, there has never been a complete audit. The executive order directs a full audit accounting of the federal government's digital asset holdings. The U.S. will not sell any Bitcoin deposited into the reserve, and it will be kept as a store of value. The reserve, like a digital Fort Knox for cryptocurrency, often called digital gold. Premature sales of Bitcoin have already cost the U.S. taxpayer over $17 billion in lost value. Now the federal government will have a strategy to maximize the value of its holdings. The Secretaries of Treasury and Commerce are authorized to develop budget-neutral strategies for acquiring additional Bitcoin, provided that those strategies have no incremental costs on American taxpayers. In addition, this executive order establishes a U.S. digital asset stockpile consisting of digital assets other than Bitcoin forfeited in criminal or civil proceedings. The government will not acquire additional assets for the stockpile beyond those obtained through forfeiture proceedings. The purpose of this stockpile is responsible stewardship of the government's digital assets under the Treasury departments. Promises made, promises kept. President Trump promised to create a strategic Bitcoin reserve and digital asset stockpile. Those promises have been kept. This executive order underscores President Trump's commitment to making the U.S. a crypto capital of the world. I want to thank the president for his leadership, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to read the last part, but my reaction to this news, right? So as I said, the market immediately dumped after this news came out because, it's for a variety of reasons, which we'll talk about. But regardless of what the exact reason is, I think that the market is being irrational because, well, here's why, right? People being irrational and dumping BTC because Trump didn't promise to buy any additional Bitcoin. Well, like he said revenue neutral, but like he didn't promise to buy an exact number in an exact amount of time frame. But I still think that this is very bullish. Just calling it a strategic Bitcoin national reserve is a big change of tune, which underscores that from the U.S. government's perspective, BTC is now an official reserve or strategic asset on the same level as gold or oil. And just to kind of elaborate a little bit more, I know like right now people are kind of, I want to say like angry, upset that the market has gone down and like, egg prices have soared. Like that, apparently that's a thing in the States. I live in Canada, so I can't comment firsthand experience on it, but people are upset about that too. And, there's just a whole host of complaints how like, finally this crypto or Bitcoin executive order comes out and the market dumps. So I saw this post by Ed Krasentine, who's, from the Democrat side. And, he always takes shots at the Republicans. Sometimes is justified, sometimes is unjustified. I think that this is an example of Ed being, unreasonable and unjustified, because he posted this saying that, oh, look, this is Trump's economy. Are you tired of losing? It's only going to get worse because inflation will go up. We will have a recession. We try to warn you. And let me just push back upon some of the kind of negativity that I feel. And this is related to the Bitcoin kind of executive order, because I think that the fact that the market dumped reflected what a lot of people are feeling, but I think that it's not entirely accurate. Like people are not looking at the long-term picture, right? So there's a graph from Trueflation, which is a independent third-party aggregator that measures inflation on a day-to-day basis in the United States, and their data is a lot faster and I would say more accurate than the Fed's, like, CPI and PCE and all that stuff, because that stuff lags really hard. And what is reflected in Trueflation often will take a few months to reflect upon CPI and stuff, but eventually it will get reflected. And what Trueflation is telling me that inflation is dropping like a rock, actually, in the United States. And we can debate exactly why it's dropping, but according to Trueflation, right now, which is the beginning of March, inflation in the U.S. has dropped to 1.3% year over year. So it's actually lower than what the Fed's preferred rate is of 2.0. And I just responded to Ed Krastenstein's post up above, and I couldn't include the full picture, but I quote tweeted him, and basically I said, hey, like, bookmark this and look back on this in 2 years. The progressives in America are, in my opinion, so short-sighted that they just want to dunk on Trump because the markets are down after only 2 months of Trump in office. Inflation is dropping like a rock, as exemplified by the Trueflation thing I just talked about. Conversely, inflation would have been entrenched if the Dems got in, because they would have want to pass another $4 trillion spending bill, and Doge would not be a thing. So there's that, and the government spending would skyrocket. The Doge cuts will prevent America from going bankrupt, although unemployment will indeed tick up in the short term due to the fired federal workers. But that's a one-time increase. The recession fears are simply reflecting what most Americans have already been feeling under Biden, but the media was gaslighting everyone into thinking everything was fine because the stock market went up under Biden. But the beneficiaries of the stock market going up are mainly upper class or upper middle class people. The wars in Ukraine and Israel and Gaza may not be fully ended, but it's hell of a lot closer to ending now compared to when Biden was president. The 10-year U.S. bond yield, we talked about that earlier in the show, has dropped dramatically. Oil is also on a downwards trend. I just took a look at oil prices. It's at $66. So it's at $70 just a few weeks ago, and it was even higher the more you go back, right? So oil prices are dropping. Dropping bond yields will also allow the U.S. to finance its debt more cheaply. We talked about that earlier. Oil dropping is good news for inflation, and I believe that Fed rate cuts will follow soon. And I didn't mention this in the post, but QT, I believe, will end soon as well. Quantitative tightening by the Fed will end. So yeah, I just see a lot of kind of things brewing in the background, and a lot of bullishness brewing in the background. But I don't know, people are just like a giant ball of anger right now, right? Like they can't see all of this, and this strategic Bitcoin reserve thing is just the latest prime example of the market being irrational. So let me just toss a question back to you guys. First of all, your reaction to this Bitcoin strategic reserve and national digital asset stockpile news. What do you think? Do you think that this is just like, run-of-the-mill giant nothing burger because the market didn't really react to it, or it actually reacted to it negatively? Or do you think that this is a big deal? And what do you think of, the Trump economy in total? Is it going to be bad, like what Ed Krastenstein was saying? Or do you agree with my response to him more, that things are brewing, we just got to be a little bit more patient? So yeah, lots of questions, however you want to address it. Take it away.
So I think that the news on the strategic reserve is excellent news, because now the United States government is a holder of Bitcoin on a official capacity, but they're also they hold it as an official reserve. It's it's not just El Salvador anymore. I think that's a really big deal. it's not necessarily going to bring immediate buying pressure into the market because they already hold the Bitcoin. They're just moving it from one department to the other, which I know a lot of Bitcoiners really wanted to happen. I mean, I will say that like from the beginning, Trump was himself calling it not a reserve, a stockpile, and was basically made it clear that his main plan was to move the confiscated Bitcoin that the Department of Justice has and move it over to the Treasury. That's basically been my expectation, but I think that a lot of hype got brought in that America would actually like use tax dollars to buy Bitcoin, and I don't actually think that that's a realistic plan. I'm very curious on what Sachs meant when he said that they want to explore purchasing Bitcoin. What is it? What does he call it? Budget neutral strategies for acquiring additional Bitcoin. So I don't know if that's like mining or what exactly they're going to be involved in. Maybe more confiscations, but I'm interested in seeing what's going to come out of that for sure. And I also like that there's now been clarity that this is a Bitcoin reserve. And yeah, they're going to put the altcoins in there, but they're only the altcoins that were confiscated. They're not going to be buying anymore. So that's pretty positive, I think. There's been a lot of criticism from the Bitcoin world that like why are we buying XRP and Cardano? And okay, they're not buying it. I'm happy with that. If they want to hold it in some like imaginary reserve, they can go ahead and do that. But this is a Bitcoin story, and I'm very happy about that. In terms of like the in terms of the whole like Trump economy conversation, like I'm more on your side, Andy. I think that there's a lot of positive things brewing. I think that a lot of what's happening right now is all stock market and a lot of sentiment related factors. I mean, there were bad job numbers today, but that happens every so often. You get a bad job number here and there, so I'm not exactly sure what that's related to until we get more information there. But I think that inflation is dropping like a rock. If true-flation is right, I'm really interested in what's causing that. Maybe it's the strong dollar. Maybe it's the sentiment around trade talks is causing spending to kind of freeze up a bit. But I think that there's a lot of positive things on the horizon, and I think Trump has like a really good setup. I think Dodge is a really good setup. I think Dodge is actually is one of the factors that's causing Treasury yields to drop. And uncertainty also causes Treasury yields to drop though too, because people start flooding into U.S. debt and start selling their domestic debt. So that's a factor too. So in the end, I think that Trump has a good setup ahead of him as long as he doesn't like literally tariff all the auto parts coming out of Canada and Mexico. I think they should be all right. So we'll just see what comes out of the trade situation. But I'm not really. I think that progressives and liberals are just like they're just. What was the word you used, Andy? You said short. Yeah, they're just doing this short-sighted things to dunk on Trump. It's partisan. Both sides would probably do similar things. Like Biden had bad months in the stock market too, even though he had like a good overall stock market. I don't think 2 months of the stock market movement is really important. This is normal cyclical movements in the stock market that we see every year, and I also think that a lot of like these really strong, like really far left progressives, like simply don't really understand the stock market. They just like commenting on it when the stock market goes up and down, but a lot of these guys don't really know what the hell they're talking about. So I mean, I take their like opinions with a grain of salt.
For the strategic Bitcoin reserve, I think that it's not quite a nothing burger, but I think it's not nearly as exciting as I think most people were hoping for, and maybe not quite the catalyst that we were really fingers crossing that it would be. I think that it's definitely showing a commitment from the U.S. government that this is a asset that they want to have a lot of value in, and I think that in itself is very bullish for Bitcoin itself. The only caveat to that is really that I feel like to a lot of people's perspectives, this really feels like moving
your change from one pocket to another. It's not really like they really did anything other than call it a new name. The important part is that the new name has new expectations and new requirements as to what it's allowed to do with it and what its purpose is, which does amount to being a bullish sentiment on Bitcoin itself. But I just feel like for a lot of people, there was kind of a more of an expectation that there was going to be more going on with this rather than just essentially moving it from one pocket to another pocket and changing the name. Again, I think that in the long run, this is a good sign. We've had so many good news stories coming out of this. I think this also increases the validity of strategic Bitcoin reserves by the states, because now we have the federal government doing it. I feel like that makes it much more compelling for a state perspective to also do that. But we'll see how that pans out at the end of the day. But I think that overall we're not looking at. I wouldn't say this is like crazy good news. Like I don't think it's on the level of like the Bitcoin ETF release, but I think that this is still continuing their trend of like generally pro Bitcoin stuff coming out for the most part. So I think that overall that's like just a good sign. We haven't really moved. Bitcoin's price hasn't moved the way we want it to yet. Like on the upwards to the upside, but I think that we've been setting up all these steps that are we're building the ramp basically. I feel like we built the ramp. We just need something to like give us some momentum to go up it, right? And I think that this is a contributing step to that ramp. Like I think this is an addition to that. So I think that's pretty good. With regards to the economy in the States, inflation, all that stuff, we're looking. It's been like 2 months, if that, barely. Not even 2 months. I don't think yet. Actually, like I don't think that we can really sit here and be like, wow, this is clear sign that Trump is doing terribly or clear sign that Trump is doing well yet, really. I think we can all agree that Trump's tariff actions have increased a lot of volatility in the market and in sentiments regarding the American perspectives. I think that probably, though, we would not disagree. I think we probably also agree, though, that there's been a significant amount of uptrend in companies planning to have a significantly larger presence in the U.S. than they have been previously. We've seen large commitments from multiple chip makers and et cetera that are planning to build foundries in the States, and there's a significant push through on that front, which is all good for the U.S. And we can discuss how whether or not this is because of Trump or this was all in the works beforehand. But I think we're in a spot where the U.S. is setting itself up for at least moderate success, as long as they settle down with the tariffs in the coming months, either putting them to a more managed level or with specific tariffs, or removing them, having gained concessions from their allies, adversaries, whoever you want to call them. The Americans will be better off, likely, in that regard than they were currently. And I think that as long as that does not stay in, like as long as these blanket tariffs don't stay in for more than like 2 or 3 months, I don't think that we're going to see significant uptick in inflation, just because I don't think there'll be enough time for a lot of those costs to really come into effect on consumers. So And I mean, so far we haven't really seen that, right? The consumer pricing has not moved nearly as rapidly as the tariffs have basically come in and gone. Like they appear and then they're gone and then they're back. It's like at the end of the day, it's I don't think the concerns. I think the concerns have are valid. I just don't think that at the current rate we're going to necessarily result in a recession just from the result of them basically just shaking the stock market up a little bit, you know, and shaking up the trade deals. So I think that the people who are using the stock market as a look, the performance is not good. Yeah, as Andy was saying, you could look at any month in the stock market and basically, oh, the stock market's up. Clearly, the president did something. No, not necessarily. You know, it's not the government's. The government is not the reason necessarily that the stock market is up or down. In this case, you know, Trump is probably a contributing factor for it being down. But on that front, you know, in the long run, who's to say that this isn't going to be something that also makes it go up in the future, right? Like we don't really understand the widespread effects of the acts that he's doing currently, because these aren't something that we're going to be able to understand right now, because they're things that will be significant changes necessitated in the future. So, for example, like like the car company, for example, like if they want to build more stuff in the States, they're going to have they need time to build the stuff in the States. So we're not going to be able to gauge how the impacts of what Trump's doing now on that. So it's just looking at like the last like couple months of the stock market and being like Trump's doing a terrible job. Like, I don't think that's entirely fair. And that's not me saying that Trump's doing a good job, to be clear. It's just that I'm like, I don't think that we have enough data to assess on to what extent Trump is doing a good job or a bad job. I think that volatility does not equal a bad job necessarily. It could be a bad job, but it is not definitively a bad job. And that's kind of what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And by the way, your analogy with like building the ramp, I think is really accurate. Like we've been building the ramp for a long time, and then now we're like decorating the ramp rather than using it. And I think that that's like what's pissing a lot of people off. It's like, you know, when can we rally? When can we rock it? And I see this in our like group chat. Like, you know, you're all part of that like big group chat that we have. Like people are just getting super frustrated, and I'm not saying that that's, you know, they don't have a right to be frustrated, because like I think we're all feeling a little bit frustrated at this point, but it's to the point where I think like good news, as long as like if it doesn't move the price, then I don't care, and it's like it's all bad. Right? Like if it doesn't move, I just want the price to go up. If it doesn't move the price, then it's bad. Like people are getting to that point, and I think that that's actually probably a positive sign that we're close to the bottom. Sunil, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, like in my experience of just like investing in stocks, like I've been investing in like risk assets for a while now. Like yeah, I've owned Tesla since 2016, and just buying other tech stocks and buying Bitcoin and trying to follow the news cycle. Like whenever all the bulls like list all the catalysts that are going to cause like the stock to go up 30% or Bitcoin to go to $1 million, like it never happens. Like it just never happens. Every single time, like people will communicate catalysts for months and months and months, and the catalyst happens, and the stock goes down, and then maybe 2 weeks later, the actual event will occur. So it's never like exactly on the timeline that the most like bullish bulls are putting out there. It just never happens. It's just how the stock market often works. If you're an uber bull, you probably have to wait like 3 days longer than expected for the rally to start, and that's just kind of how it goes.
Yeah,
For the
no,
people that are at home, like worried and frustrated about the ramp, it's happening.
yeah, and I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know either when the big ramp is happening. I wish I did, trust me. But I don't. But what I can do is only tell you guys about all these like bullish news, like this executive order that just happened, right? And I do think that this, like, they somehow managed to strike like a deal that everyone should be really happy with, right? So when this news of a potential for a strategic Bitcoin reserve first came out, there was a lot of debate between, the crypto people and the Bitcoin maxis, right? The maxis only want Bitcoin, and it's like, oh, I don't want all these like, random, shit coins, to put it politically incorrectly. That I don't want all these like shit coins in along with Bitcoin. I only want a strategic reserve with Bitcoin. Well, this executive order, it pleases everyone, right? Because like the other coins, they can have their own strategic, or they call it a national stockpile or something, digital asset stockpile, and at least like it aligns the values of the crypto community with the government, because think about it, every time the government busts like a scam or something, they confiscate the coins, and then the coins go into a stockpile which the government promises never to sell, which is basically like you just burn the coins, right? So that causes the coins price to go up every time the government busts a scam. So you'll align like the industry with this like incentive to go after crypto scams, because every time a scam gets busted, it helps the coin that the coins like that the scammer was scamming, right? Like it actually helps the coin's price go up. So it aligns the government's values um, with the crypto industry, and the crypto industry has right now, I would say, a pretty bad reputation for like, having a lot of scams and all that stuff. So I think that that'll help with that. And with regards to the national or the strategic Bitcoin reserve, it's a separated thing that's apart from the stockpile. And they didn't say, although they didn't promise to buy an additional amount or like when they're going to do it, like they clearly indicated that they're open to buying additional Bitcoin, right? Which they did not indicate that they were going to buy more Solana or XRP or something like that. So that I think should please the Bitcoin maxis a lot too. So I think they found a balance, right? It's the best of both worlds, where everybody can walk away thinking that they got something that they wanted, and maybe you didn't get 100% of what you wanted, right? Like I wish it could be the case that Trump would say, "Oh, I'm going to buy 1 million Bitcoin tomorrow," right? But come on, like realistically, that was never going to happen. And to spend additional money would probably require congressional approval, and it's like a long process, and that was not possible to be done by an executive order. So I think that David Sachs, along with Trump and all the people around him, they're doing the best they can to really help this industry. And by the way, this like strategic Bitcoin reserve, they're gonna be placed under the management of the Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, and the Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, and both of them are super pro Bitcoin, by the way. So I think I read somewhere that Bessent owns like $500,000 worth of Bitcoin ETFs, and Howard Lutnick has appeared on multiple podcasts and like Bitcoin related media that I've watched that he's talking really positively about Bitcoin, and don't know how much he owns personally, but I'm sure he owns quite a bit of Bitcoin personally as well. So, both of these gentlemen are super pro Bitcoin. So I would imagine that if there was a way for them to, use budget neutral strategies, whatever that means, to acquire more Bitcoin, that they would, of course, be exploring doing that and probably actually doing that at some point in the future. So I think that this is a win-win, and this is a really good executive order. And a lot of things that were mentioned in this executive order, that people are just like they're just negative on it because it's not something that happens right now. And it's like it's super painful right now, and I just want relief right now. But like some things don't just like happen magically like that, right? Sometimes good things take time.
Yeah, I mean, like the United States government can't just like print money and buy Bitcoin. Like there's a process to these things. Like it's a big government, you know. It's like it's not just like an African republic that like is ruled by like a dictator, you know. It's a kind of a big deal in America. You can't just print money. You can't just use tax dollars to buy Bitcoin. Like you you have to convince the public that it's a good idea before you can do that. And you have to get through Congress. But in the end, I think it's a massive sentiment shift because the United States government owns Bitcoin. And when people say Bitcoin doesn't have any intrinsic value, Bitcoin's fake money, it's like it's owned by the United States government as a reserve asset, and you're telling me it doesn't have any intrinsic value. So it's actually a big deal. It's just it's going to take a few days to weeks to play out.
And also, people are forgetting about the state Bitcoin reserves, right? Like the individual state level Bitcoin reserves. So I think that the way that Trump has done this to speak publicly about Bitcoin, to adopt it on a national level, that's going to make it easier for the Bitcoin strategic reserve bills at the state levels to pass. And if those pass, the states will actually be buying more Bitcoin. So the U.S. Federal government might not buy more Bitcoin, but a lot of these bills from the state level, they do say that you can use state tax dollars to buy Bitcoin. So I think that you're going to be seeing some of that happen in the next few months or so. And then that will be actual additional buying pressure. And then not to mention, like, what if other countries see what the United States is doing and they feel left behind and they want to catch up, right? So like, I bet, maybe China wasn't taking it seriously back then and they were like banning Bitcoin mining and all that stuff. But then now they're seeing that, hey, like, what if, like, they might not be believers of Bitcoin, but in the back of their heads, like the Chinese officials, they're probably thinking like, okay, what if there's like a 1% chance that this Bitcoin thing actually takes off, and like, costs them nothing essentially to buy like 100,000 Bitcoin by China's standards, right? Like, I think that they could easily enter this race as well.
And it was announced this week. Well, not announced. It was rumored that David Bailey is actually speaking to the Chinese. And David Bailey is the Bitcoiner who runs Bitcoin Magazine that was talking to Trump months ago. So that's something. It is true.
Yeah, and as I said, we're building the ramp to the next bull market, and now we're decorating the ramp instead of using it. And a lot of people are saying like, stop painting it. It's good to go. Like, just use it. But you can't rush the market, right? Like, the market is going to do what the market is going to do, and no matter how angrily you yell at it, it's not going to do something just because you yelled at it. It's going to take its own time. So yeah, I think I'm really bullish for the coming months. I think we're kind of stuck in a rut right now, but I think eventually we'll get over it. And then yeah, if it follows the 2017 cycle, by the way, for Bitcoin, which is very similar to 2017, because guess who was first elected president in 2016? Trump, right? So Trump's first term, we had the same president, orange president, orange coin. We have the same guy in charge, and then now he's a lot more pro Bitcoin than he was in 2017. In 2017, he called it a scam or something like that, right? Now he's openly endorsing everything that has to do with Bitcoin and crypto. I think that if we just get even like half of what the percentage gains of Bitcoin was in 2017, if we get like just half of that in 2025, then Bitcoin could go to $500,000 easily before the end of the year. But yeah, it's hard for us to see it because we're sitting here like debating and like, kind of cringing our noses at like every $1,000 move. But when Bitcoin does this thing, it really does this thing. So